Grocers are blaming the new shortages on a fresh wave of panic buying and continued supply chain issues, reporting that the 2020 toilet paper wars are back in many of the country's supermarkets. As infection numbers rise, store shelves across the nation are getting increasingly barer, with consumers complaining that bread, meat, fresh produce, and shelf-stable items have become impossible to find. On social media, one shopper named Emily said she was shocked to see her local supermarket completely out of meat, fruit and vegetables, and also dairy products and frozen items. People were walking around looking shocked and trying to work out what to get for dinner instead. A lot of the produce left was in poor condition. It was the first time I've seen a store like that, she wrote. Emily, who lives in California, said she had to go somewhere else to find what she needed, and given that most big supermarkets in her area also had depleted inventories, she was only able to find a few items on her list in a small grocery shop. I think now it's a really important time, more than ever, to start shopping locally and supporting smaller businesses, she stressed. Many other shoppers had a similar experience in recent weeks, and they've been exposing the empty shelves they see on Twitter. When shopping today, not a single loaf of bread, no toilet paper, and cereals depleted, one user wrote. A Walmart spokesperson who remained in anonymity told CNBC that panic buying was seriously aggravating the problem of supply shortages, especially because every time shelves were restocked, consumers would wipe everything down in record time. The source also said that the giant retailer is currently experiencing direct impacts of supply chain disruptions, including reduced transport capacity and warehouse worker shortages. In a note released earlier this week, executives apologized to their customers if an item they wish to purchase is unavailable when they do their shopping, and said that the company is working hard to restock our shelves as quickly as possible. We're also seeing an increased number of staff members being required to isolate due to household exposure to the virus while they wait for test results, the source added, highlighting that the latest surge in cases had put additional pressure on its operations. Meanwhile, food banks around the U.S. are struggling with the impacts of empty shelves as daily essentials become harder to source and prices jump to historic highs. One food bank in Texas said that financially insecure families are the hardest hit by the shortages induced by panic buying, since many cannot afford to buy in bulk to compete with the hoarders. Many Americans are living week to week, the organization wrote. They are much less likely to have a financial cushion against changes in the external environment, including affordable food and groceries suddenly being unavailable or unaffordable. When the food supply chain is disrupted by events such as panic buying, our food bank struggles to source enough food to distribute across the country to people who need it most. The impacts are making it even harder for many American families to put food on the table, the charity emphasized. At the same time, in an attempt to fill in the gaps left on the shelves, supermarkets are turning to different, less popular brands than they normally would stock to at least provide some options for their customers. On the other hand, restaurants are having to downsize their menus to cope with a limited range of available ingredients, while prices across the board go on a steady climb. As shipping bottlenecks and factory closures leave a toll on the food industry, restaurant and grocery leaders say that the combined pressures of inflation, low stock, and labor shortages are sparking major operational issues. It's a confluence of all of the events, explains Bob Laws, the president of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. There's a shortage of truckers, a shortage of warehouse workers, a shortage of pickers, a shortage of meat cutters. It's just wreaking havoc on the entire retail world. Unfortunately, there's no end in sight for the supply chain chaos. According to Simon Heaney, an analyst at maritime research consultancy Drewry, 2022 is shaping up to be another year of severe disruption, undersupply, and extreme cost for shippers. The virus is once again showing it's in charge, he said. predicting 12 more months of stretched labor and healthcare-related red tape. While the new variant spreads across the nation, workers who deliver goods on ships and trucks are facing mounting problems as movement restrictions are reinstituted. They're having to go through long weeks of isolation, combined with the precarious nature of crossing borders and fears of getting sick. Some people are refusing contracts while others are looking for work elsewhere, companies say. The industry was already plagued by a driver shortage before the health crisis, but the trucking sector labor crisis has become far more acute over the past 18 months, Heaney said. Companies are having to raise wages by about 30% to attract drivers back to the market, but that doesn't mean they're having any success. In fact, the founder of a trucking company has explained that the sanitary outbreak has made these jobs very unattractive. Long hours on the road, sleeping in the cab, and now not knowing if the people you interact with have the virus. Truck driving isn't very attractive anymore, said Constantinescu, a 27-year veteran in the sector. I look behind me and I can't see any new generation of drivers. A couple of months ago, the American Trucking Association estimated the nation was 80,000 drivers short of what it needed to meet freight demand. That number, however, has escalated to more than 100,000 in January as conditions worsened. Needless to say, the trucking industry is not alone. Businesses in virtually every sector have been reporting severe staffing shortfalls, and in the complex system of shipping, cracks in one link in the chain can create bottlenecks for others down the line. In a recent interview, the senior vice president of Massachusetts Food Association, Brian Horton, whose group represents supermarket and grocery store businesses, described the struggles of one MFA member whose bakery prepares bread for other companies to sell. Over the past month, the bakery staff have been saying they couldn't get any of the ingredients that they need to make the products, which has impacted business profits and also prevented other stores from stocking their bread. That's why many grocers are having to make some tough decisions, either allowing shelves to go empty or offering customers brands and products that they are not used to buying. Say you're in the dairy aisle, Horton said. You're gonna see different names or different brands of what's usually seen because everybody's working to get substitute products. They just can't get the products that they've usually gotten in the past, and that trickles all the way back to coming in at the ports, which is slow. Likewise, restaurants have been grappling with unavailable products pretty routinely for months, not weeks, according to MRA's Bob Luz. It's hard enough if you're shopping for a family, but imagine you have a menu you're supposed to deliver to the guests each week, Luz said. For instance, all of a sudden, chicken wings go out of stock. How does a restaurant go out of stock on chicken wings? The U.S. restaurant industry is also facing a significant labor shortage as baby boomers retire at a faster rate than new workers join, Luz continued, a trend exacerbated by the recent virus wave. For the Greater Boston Food Bank, supply chain issues pose a conundrum, the organization's president and CEO Catherine D'Amato said in an interview released on Wednesday. She revealed that products that would normally arrive in 2 to 3 days are now arriving in 5 to 7 weeks. On top of the delays, the food bank has grappled with a 10 to 20% increase in the cost of food that it purchases wholesale, D'Amato disclosed. Shortages can be driven by supply chain issues, consumer behavior, or environmental factors, so it's hard to pinpoint what will be affected next, noted Kurt Covington, Senior Director of Institutional Credit at Ag America, arguing that food supplies are likely to remain scarce throughout the entire year. Now, given that Americans are eating more at home than they used to 2 years ago, consumer patterns have changed, and the gap between supply and demand has only grown wider. With panic buying and hoarding making a comeback at this point of the crisis, it means that inventories will remain tight in the first half of 2022, and prices will reach levels never before seen in modern history. Data from the Consumer Brands Association shows that U.S. groceries typically have 5 to 10% of their items out of stock at any given time. But right now, that unavailability rate is hovering around 20% in urban centers and up to 35% in rural areas. In a recent study conducted by business consultancy KPMG, 71% of grocery shoppers said they were very concerned about shortages or stockouts, but only 35% of them were willing to switch brands when their favorite items are out of stock. For that reason, when retailers finally are able to restock their shelves, they're reimposing purchasing limits of select items to prevent the panic buying frenzy from getting force. Costco was the latest to reintroduce temporary purchase limits on some items, including toilet paper. But while big retailers are able to source more supplies and handle staffing challenges amid the worsening supply chain crisis, millions of small business owners are on the brink of bankruptcy. Small business owners continue to face one obstacle after another, nearly 2 years after the onset of the health crisis, outlined SBAM President and CEO Brian Calley. After dealing with closures and restrictions, there's a new set of significant challenges that small business owners face. Workforce shortages, inflation, and supply chain disruptions are prevalent issues that have the ability to jeopardize their success. A survey released today by the Small Business Association of Michigan exposed that 56% of small businesses in the country are reporting workforce shortages, while about the same rate is being overwhelmed by inflation. 59% are suffering from supply chain disruptions for over a year, and although 70% of businesses are increasing wages to attract and maintain employees, 66% of them are finding it hard to maintain the staff. Grocery stores can close if labor and product shortages intensify, warned Calley. If the situation worsens, some grocery stores won't be able to stay open, threatening food security in rural and remote areas that rely on a sole independent grocer, he said. Employee absenteeism due to workers calling in sick and health protocols has hit about 30% at some stores and is continuing to rise. In some cases, grocers are short nearly 40% of the usual stock of a variety of products, he continued. Especially in the West, some grocers are saying the situation is as bad as it was in the spring of 2020 in terms of supply, Calley said, and the shortages are making all sorts of supplies run lower than normal. Sadly, chaos seems to be the new normal for the U.S. supply chain, and the problems we're witnessing right now will have huge repercussions in the months ahead. The worst is yet to come, and if you want to keep updated with the latest developments of this ravaging crisis, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on this video and please subscribe to our channel to get the latest notifications. Thank you so much for watching.